What's up, Green Bay Packers fans? Welcome back. As always, thank you for joining me. My name's Paul Brettel. Today we're here to discuss two of the bigger challenges that the Packers are going to face on Sunday against the Philadelphia Eagles. And again, this is an Eagles team that presents a bunch of challenges that the Packers are going to have to take on. But today we're going to focus on two of the bigger ones. But first, before we dive in, you know what to do. Hit like on the video, hit subscribe on the YouTube channel. I greatly appreciate it. Find all my work over at ESPNlacrosse.com, including the article versions of what we're discussing here today. Follow me on Twitter at Paul_Brettel. And for my Wisconsin sports radio fans, Packers, Brewers, Bucks, Badgers, whatever you need, download the 105.5 ESPN Lacrosse app. Find me on Sports Lead Monday through Friday, 3 to 6, multiple days per week. So like I said, we're going to dive into two specific elements of this Eagles team that are going to be big challenges for the Packers because they're big challenges for everyone, right? And let's start with Saquon Barkley, Eagles running game against what has been all season long perhaps the most improved part of this Packers defense under Jeff Hafley in his first season. It's their run defense. And Saquon Barkley, just a tremendous and amazing season. Over 2,000 rushing yards, did that in just 16 games, didn't play this past week. Averaged 5.8 yards per attempt, the second highest mark in football this year. 13 rushing touchdowns. As you can imagine from those numbers, he led the NFL in rushes of 10 or more yards, was among the best in missed tackles forced. Just an absolute challenge for any defense, regardless of how good the run defense is. And paired with Saquon Barkley is quarterback Jalen Hurts, who I believe, as of me recording this, is still in concussion protocol, although he was on the practice field on Wednesday. But when you have that, also have that mobility element at the quarterback position, which Hurts provides. He was first among quarterbacks this season in rush attempts, totaled 630 yards on the ground, 4.2 yards per carry, had 14 rushing yards in addition to his touchdown passes. There's an added stressor on the defense that comes when that element's there. If you have Jalen Hurts on his own, that's a challenge. If you have Saquon Barkley on his own, that is a challenge. You put those two together, it becomes an even bigger challenge because there's an added dimension, different elements if you're the defense that you now have to be prepared for. And the Eagles use the RPO game at one of the highest rates in football this season. And when there's that element of trying to decipher, if you're a defender, who has the football, and you're trying to make that split-second decision, there's hesitation, right? And in the NFL, it only takes that split second of hesitation for a passing window to open, for a running lane to open up, and it stresses the defense horizontally, right? You have to be more mindful of being spread out to get to different parts of the field. So now there's more spacing for that offense to operate in, whether it's a pass, whether it's a running play, whatever it might be. So again, individually, each of those players can present a massive challenge for a defense. You put them together in the backfield, and there's an added wrinkle that the defensive coordinator, the defenders now have to be prepared for, and a different, more challenging element when combined that is now just a part of the equation, right? And that is something that has to be factored in on every single play. Now, flipping sides, the Green Bay run defense this season, again, like I said, might not be a more improved part of this defense under the first year of Jeff Hafley than the Packers run defense. They finished the regular season allowing just 4 yards per carry. It's the third best mark in football. They gave up fewer than 100 rushing yards per game this season, ranked 7th in the NFL, and they did that against some really dynamic running backs. They faced Christian McCaffrey. They faced Aaron Jones, the Detroit Lions backfield with David Montgomery, Jahmyr Gibbs, Devin Chain of the Miami Dolphins. Packers did that against some really, really good rushing offenses this year. Faced the Philadelphia Eagles in week 1. And when you see a team operating consistently at a high level against the run, that success, of course, is going to start in the trenches, right? With the interior defensive line, generating a steady push, occupying blockers so others can make plays, taking on double teams, all things of that nature. That's where the success starts. But when you consistently see a defense performing well against the run, it's all 11 players, right? It's the edge defenders. And I think it flies under the radar for Rashawn Gary because, again, pressure sacks get the attention. Pressure sacks are largely what he's paid to do, right? But then LaFleur talked about this, but his improvement as a run defender has been massive this season. And he's been a key part of the success that the Packers have had in the run game. With the edge rushers, it's up to them to set the edge, to not let the ball carrier get outside, funnel them back to the middle of the field where your interior defenders, your linebackers, if they're shooting gaps, can make plays. The linebackers, we've seen this with Edgerrin Cooper, just with the speed, athleticism that he has just to erase space and catch up to a ball carrier. We saw with Quay Walker before he was dealing with the ankle injury, his ability to get sideline to sideline to stop running backs from being able to cut up field, shooting gaps to make plays, shedding blocks so he's not taken out of the play. Packers linebackers have done a really good job. The nickel, Keyshawn Nixon or Javon Bullard, who's ever been in there, a big part of that responsibility that comes with that position group, because you're in the thick of it, right? You're right by the line of scrimmage. You're not far off from the backfield. You have to be a capable and willing run defender. And then the cornerbacks and safeties rallying to the football. Matt LaFleur talks about how he will pause the tape in front of the team to showcase how many Packers helmets he can see within that screenshot when the ball carrier is being tackled, to see how many guys are rallying to the football. And more often than not, the Packers have done, again, all 11 players, all 11 defenders have done an excellent job in that regard. So it's everyone that's contributing to this Packers run defense. And I talked to Carl Brooks recently and asked him just about the growth that the group has had. And he just talked about how the defensive scheme has obviously played a part in it, just getting off the ball, shedding blocks, letting their natural abilities take over rather than more of a read and react approach, which is what you can see in a 3-4 defensive scheme that the Packers were previously under. You're diagnosing what's the running back doing, what's the quarterback doing, what are the blockers doing, and that's, again, impacting how you then proceed as a defensive lineman, whereas in this scheme, as we've heard, as we've seen, let's get off the ball, let's get into the backfield, get after the ball carrier, get after the quarterback. So just a really, really good collective performance. All 11 defenders, obviously the coaching staff as well, in what we've seen from Green Bay this season. Now, rewinding to week 1, when the Packers and Eagles obviously played to open up the regular season, Saquon Barkley in that game had 109 rushing yards on 24 carries. I believe that's an average of 4.5 yards per rush. However, I think it's noteworthy, right? Not everything. Noteworthy that of those rushing yards, 109, 34 came on one carry. On the other 23 carries, Barkley was averaging 3.2 yards per rush. Now, it'd be foolish of me to sit here and say and to discount that 34-yard run. It happened. It came in the second half. It was a pivotal key part of how that second half unfolded. So it's absolutely a part of the equation, and that's not to take away from it at all. But I think for context purposes, as well as we just look back at the numbers, it was a performance of, again, a really big gain and then some modest gains mixed in versus just a steady 5-6 yards every single rush from Barkley. Because, again, how the game unfolds when you have, again, scenario 1 that was described versus scenario 2, which is just 5-6 yards over and over and over again. In terms of the game flow, like how things unfold, that's different, right? So the Packers, and again, this is a completely different Packers defense from week 1, completely different Eagles offense from week 1 as well. I mean, both teams, that's a long time ago, especially in the football world. A lot has changed. A lot of growth for both units have taken place. And another part of that equation as well, and we'll see how the Packers go about it on Sunday, the second time through. But after that Eagles game, Jeff Hafley had talked about the pass rush. The emphasis for that group in week 1 against Hurts, again, because of his mobility, was on a more controlled pass rush, right? Making sure that they formed the pocket, kept Jalen Hurts in the pocket. But with that, your pass rush loses a little bit of bite as well, right? There's not the same aggressiveness that can come from just getting off the ball and doing everything you can to get in the backfield, because when you take that approach, the pocket can lose its shape. It can be easier for the quarterback to get out, to extend plays, make plays with his legs, whatever it might end up being. So the Packers sacrifice some of their aggressiveness, some of their ability to generate steady pressure on Hurts for keeping him in the pocket. And they did do a good job of not letting him take the game over as a ball carrier. Hurts had just 33 yards in that game on 13 attempts as a ball carrier. So those are just some, again, what happened in that game. I think, again, noteworthy, but it was so long ago that I don't think we can necessarily look back and say, well, this team has the advantage because of what happened in week 1. It's not the case anymore. That's far, far too long ago. But we can look back at that game again just for some context around what happened, how things unfolded, where successes were, where failures were, and things of that nature. And of course, like I said at the start of all this, there's so many challenges that this Eagles offense presents. The Packers, any team that they're going up against, they have the passing game, A.J. Brown, Devonta Smith. But my opinion, I think if the Packers are going to find any sort of success in this game, starts with their ability to contain Saquon Barkley, not let him run absolutely wild. As we've talked about before from the Packers' perspective, just generally speaking, if you get the run game going, you're ahead of the sticks, right? You're operating in short down and distance situations. The playbook's open to you. Now as a defense, you have to defend that entire field. You're on your heels. There's play action. So many other elements that you now have to contend with. Whereas on the flip side, if you can contain the run, put the offense in obvious passing situations, predictable downs, the defense can often have the advantage. Pass rush-wise, pinning their ears back, coverage-wise, there's only so many routes you can run as an offense when you're in a 3rd and 8, when you're in a 3rd and 10 situation. So Packers have to find a way to contain Saquon Barkley. And I know, not groundbreaking information. That's the goal for every defense every week when they're up against the Eagles, but it's going to be one of the pivotal points in this game. All right, last thing we'll talk about today, Packers struggling passing offense against what's a very stingy and physical Eagles secondary. And I'm not going to dive too deep into all the things that are going wrong right now, the inconsistencies of the Packers passing game. If we go back 2 videos ago, we spent 20, 25 minutes, whatever it was, doing that a couple days ago. So check that video out. What I will say, it's everything, right? I know behind any success or failure, we always want to find what's the one thing, what's the one problem, what's the one thing that's working really well. But that rarely is the case in football. It's a little bit of everything, right? Jordan Love has said about his own play, his accuracy, his ball placement has to improve. The receivers, drops, have to do a better job of consistently winning their one-on-one matchups, not letting the physicality of the defensive backs disrupt the timing, the rhythm of the play, because they're not quite where they're supposed to be because their route was disrupted, or they're not right where they're supposed to be from a timing perspective as Jordan Love's going through his progressions. The offensive line, Matt LaFleur noted a couple plays in that Chicago Bears game where pressure up the middle disrupted Love as he was going through his progressions, and he didn't quite get to the point in his progression where there was an open pass catcher that could have generated a big play. So again, it's a little bit of each of those things we just mentioned here and there. There's not an overwhelming, one of those elements is out of sync, out of whack. But when you have all of those different phases, again, having their inconsistencies that pop up here and there, here and there, here and there, well, you put it together, it adds up. You get what we've seen, which has been a out of whack, disjointed Packers passing game. And in order for this offense to get back on track, that has to be a part of it. I think Josh Jacobs, the run game, I'll touch on it here in a bit, is obviously going to be it's been the catalyst behind the offense's success in the second half of the season. I think it's obviously going to have to play a big role on Sunday. But the running game in today's NFL, it can't be your only means for moving the ball. The passing game has to complement it. And getting back on track, the Packers finding that rhythm, that groove, going to be really, really tough against this Eagles secondary. Philly's going to enter this game allowing just 5.5 yards per pass attempt on the season. It's the lowest rate in the NFL. They've given up the fewest explosive plays as well in the passing game. In the secondary, they have rookies Quinyon Mitchell, Cooper DeJean. They have veteran Darius Slay at cornerback. On the back end, they got Reed Blankenship at safety, Chauncey Gardner-Johnson. I mean, and Matt LaFleur said it's a very, very physical group. The Packers have to be prepared for that play style because, like we just talked about, it's going to disrupt the timing, the rhythm of the routes if the receivers let that happen. And collectively, the Eagles secondary, they're giving up a completion rate of 62% this season, 4th lowest in football. They've generated the 4th most pass deflections this season. As Jane Reed said, they just always seem to be around the football. So big task ahead. And I think one of the big question marks coming into this game for me, and again, we mentioned all the different things that are just not quite right with this Packers offense. But one of the big things for me coming into this game is, can these Packers receivers win their one-on-one matchups. And I keep going back to that Minnesota Vikings game because afterwards, Matt LaFleur talked about how the Vikings usage in that game of more man coverage caught Green Bay off guard, right? During the halftime portion of that game when LaFleur was doing his interview, talked about how just the timing of the routes, like we've mentioned, just wasn't quite there. And that's another defense, another set of cornerbacks that are going to get up on the receivers, that are going to play physical. And in that game, at least not consistently enough, the Packers receivers weren't able to win those matchups. So again, against another opponent who's going to, again, completely different defense, Vic Fangio versus Brian Flores, but against another defense secondary that's going to be physical, it's going to use their hands. Can the Packers pass catchers, their receivers, stay on track within their route? Can they make those contested catches? Can they win those one-on-one matchups? And obviously that not having Christian Watson is another big element that's going to be missing. His downfield ability, his ability to generate those big plays, just the gravity he has, the presence that he has, the attention that he draws can help create opportunities for others in the passing game. How are the Packers' offense, how's their passing game going to overcome not having that skill set, not having that player on the football field? And I'm hoping to, in the next day or two, do a story and then eventually ultimately a video here on the tight end position. Because as we look at where the potential opportunity is for this Packers team, where's an area that they maybe could exploit in the passing game, it's tough to look at the matchup between the Packers receivers and the Eagles cornerbacks and necessarily find that. Not to say it doesn't exist, not to say there's things that Matt LaFleur can't do, not to say that Packers receivers can't win these one-on-one matchups, but I think from a matchup standpoint, I look at the tight end position. Again, you get Tucker Kraft the ball in space. Get him those because a lot of defenders in that part of the field in the space, he has the ability to make a miss, to run through them just with his play style. Luke Musgrave, his speed, his skill set, there's a Christian Watson-like presence at the tight end position. Again, different positions, but with that speed, with that size, that mismatch presence, how can the Packers utilize those two? Those are two players that I'm looking at in this game as potentially being key components of the passing game for the Green Bay Packers. And going back to the run game, they have to stay ahead of the sticks. You got to get the run game going, right? What would just hurt this offense, and we've seen it throughout the season, is that first down run that consistently maybe just gets 2 or 3 yards. You're behind the sticks. You're in the obvious passing situations like we just described on the other side of the football. The Packers have to avoid those. They can't fall into these predictable passing situations. I want to see more of a usage of play action, and a lot of that success is going to start with the run game. But like I said, it can't be the only method for moving the football for the Packers. Margin for error is just too small. Again, especially going up against a high-powered Eagles offense, if they put up points and you're behind, and that's your main method for moving the ball, well, that gets taken away, right? Because now the clock starts to come into effect. You're trying to play catch-up. You become more pass-heavy. You become more predictable. On those runs where maybe you only pick up a yard or two on first down, your running ability at that point is gone. When it's 2nd and 8, you have to pass. The Packers need the passing game to get back on track, to pick up momentum in this game against the Eagles. And like we just laid out, not to say that it can't happen, but it won't come easy against the secondary. So there you have it, my friends. I appreciate you tuning in. You know what to do. If you've come this far, you might as well hit like. You might as well hit subscribe on the video. I greatly appreciate it. Leave a comment. Let me know what your thoughts are on this upcoming game. Follow me on Twitter at Paul_Brettel. Find all my work over at ESPNLacrosse.com. Download the 1055 ESPN Lacrosse app. And until next time, friends, take care.